Welcome back to the Bible in Small Steps, and I'm Jill from the North Woods. Last night we met Babylon in full. The woman on the scarlet beast, drunk on the blood of the martyrs, glittering gold and purple, and we watched the beast's own allies turn on her at the very end. I don't think it's it's imagery, I think, of worldly power, right? Babylon is going to be that ancient nation that just ruled everything and captured the people of Israel. It would have been representative of everything. But what happens is they think they are serving whatever it is that's out there. They're actually serving the devil. And in the end, even its own servants turn on this power. And chapter 18 is where her fall first announced all the way back. It was in chapter 14. Now it's completely going to play out. And this is one of the most vivid chapters in the whole book. It's a funeral dirge sung by the very people who profited from her. So an angel with authority comes down from heaven, and the earth is illuminated by his splendor. He cries out with a mighty voice, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become the dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird." Oh, I like birds. "A haunt for every unclean, detestable beast." And this directly echoes Isaiah 13 and Jeremiah 50:39, both describing this ancient historical Babylon's ruins after its own fall. We knew that it was going to fall completely someday. And once the great cities left desolate, occupied only by wild creatures and unclean creatures. So again, I think you could say, well, Babylon fell. There is no Babylon. We don't go and vacation in Babylon, although it's technically Iraq today. But I mean, it is gone. Is this talking about now, or is it talking about the end? And like I said, I always feel like, yes, this is a book that's unhiding things. And so just because we don't have a Babylon right now in the same way, there are representations of it. But verse 13 explains why. So all the nations have drunk the wine of her sexual morality. The kings of earth committed immorality with her, and the merchants of earth grew rich from the power of her luxurious living. So you notice that there's three separate groups that are here: nations, kings, and merchants. All this chapter is coming back to develop this idea of these relationships to Babylon in turn. So then a call comes out. It's another voice from heaven, and it says, "Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plague." And this is a direct echo to God's repeated call for his people throughout the Old Testament to separate from the corrupt, the idolatrous nations, and most pointedly, the call to leave Babylon itself. Jeremiah 51:45, given that to the Israelites directly, that were living in exile centuries after. So the idea is that when there was an exile, there was a count of how many people came back, and there were probably a couple million people in exile, and only tens of thousands came back. They found a life there. They thought, well, this is pretty good. Life is pretty good here. Why would I go back to a place that's destroyed? So Jeremiah calls people, come back out. You might think you're doing a good thing. You might think you're living in a nice place, but you're not. And you're going to fall just like that nation's falling. And I think, again, is it metaphorical or is it then? Yes. To them, that was exactly what it was saying. But it's saying to us, not, I think, in a specific nation, because every nation on earth has a place where it is doing the wrong thing. And if you are falling in line with whatever that wrong thing is, you are falling in line with what it is. How do I say it? So I think the people living in various countries, like I said, ones that do things that are particularly evil, and including our own, there are things that we do right and things we do wrong, of course. But they look logical at times. Oh, well, this just makes sense. Or this is just how life is. Or, gosh, the Bible is just so old. We gotta modernize. And you think that you are not worshiping the beast. You know what I mean? nobody, I think, goes into this thinking, "Oh, I'm worshiping the beast," and then they find out later that they are. And so, this verse, I think, is really practically important line in this whole chapter for us today. It's not a call for us to physically relocate. Throughout church history and consistent with various passages of, modern day theology, that this has been understood to be a call to spiritual and moral separation, refusing to participate in the systems of exploitation, excess, idolatry that Babylon represents. And even while the believers continue to live in this world, the same way Daniel and his friends lived faithfully in literal Babylon centuries earlier, they did not become absorbed into the idolatry. So I think that's the important part of it. And verse 6 tells us that Babylon will repay double for her deeds. And verse 7 then explains that her particular sin, it says, since in her heart she says, I sit as queen, and I am no widow, and mourning I shall never see. It's this idea of this pridefulness. We know there's sexual morality there, but also this self-sufficiency, believing in herself as permanently secure. I need nothing. And it feels immune from a loss of judgment or loss or judgment. And verse 8 tells us that her plagues will come in a single day, death, mourning, famine, and she will be burned up with fire, for mighty is the Lord God who has judged her. And I kind of want to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I was watching some videos talk about Revelation because, obviously I'm trying to learn myself more about the imagery in that. And someone was making the point, and I don't know if it's true or not, that the 666, that's going to be written on the forehead and written on the hand, and you can't do commerce and you can't do anything unless you have it written. It said that it's a callback. It's a callback to when God's law should be written, on your mind and written on your hands, meaning you're doing God's work. And so he was suggesting that there's not going to be a physical 666 written on your hand. What it means is your mind and your hands are doing the will of the beast. And that's what's happening, is that it may not be physical. It may be the people actually doing that work. And so that makes me think, too, again, I don't want to put up a wanted poster, because if we say, well, no one's walking around with a 666 anymore, everything's cool. But could that guy be right? That it is, like I said, metaphorically, put it on your mind, put it in your hands, your actions and your thinking. And if we keep looking for a number, maybe we're not looking for the right thing. And maybe this is telling us what is the thing that we should actually look for: people serving her. And it says that, she'll be burned up in fire. The mighty is the Lord God who will judge her. And that's the end of it. And so the central theme of the chapter is structured as these three parallel laments in here. That's worth walking in this pattern instead of just calling out the detail, because whenever you see repetition in the Bible, it's pointing. It's putting a spotlight on something. And so the first is the king of the earth, who committed immorality with her, weeps and wails over her when they see smoke of her burning, standing far off in the fear of her torment, crying, alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city Babylon, for a single hour your judgment has come. Okay, that's interesting. And so, again, we would see people lament the burning of these evil locations, and they're sad for it because it's being judged for its evilness. The second is that the merchants of the earth weep and mourn because no one's going to buy their cargo anymore. Where's all the money and the trade going here? And the text gives us something unusual for Revelation because it's actual detail of the inventory. It's nearly 30 items long, exactly what Babylon's merchants sold back in the day: gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple, remember purple's important cloth, silk, scarlet, scented wool, wood, ivory, bronze, iron, marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, wine, oil, flour, wheat, cattle, sheep, horse, and chariots. So again, that's a deliberate list placed in here. It's almost an afterthought of all the of all, these are all the luxury goods, but then it says slaves. That is human souls. And you sit there with that in a minute and you talk about all the precious things, the metals, the foods, but at the very end, human beings are being traded like a commodity. That is how evil it is. It is right up there. And Revelation is making the unmistakable moral point that this kind of economic system, taken to its logical end, ultimately treats people just as another product. We've seen that in the past. We will see it again. We see it, currently. There are statistics out there. There are currently more people enslaved right now. And I'm not talking about in free economic systems. I'm talking about actual literal slavery than there ever was. And we've had horrible incidents in the past. And you can see this is the trade. This is the trade of Babylon. Then the third is every shipmaster, seafaring man, sailor, everyone who trades by the sea, weeps as well, throwing dust on their heads and crying out, "Alas, alas, the great city where all who had the ships of the sea grew rich by her wealth, and for a single hour she's been laid waste." So you can see the kind of lament that's going on out there. I think it's not impossible to understand that people in power are going to be like, "Oh man, we had so much power with Babylon. What now?" And then the merchants, "Well, we were selling stuff," and the seafarers who were bringing all the stuff. "Oh no, we were bringing all the stuff." And you see, they're not even thinking, wow, this great evil that even commoditize sells people like a product. They don't care about any of that. They don't care about the fact that she's worshiping the beast. They don't care about any of it. They care about, what's this going to mean for me and my wallet and my power. And that's important to understand. And so it's really interesting when you call it out plainly. They not one of them, like I says, mourns Babylon herself. They mourn what her fall is going to cost them personally, their trading partners, their markets, their power, their source of income. And that's a sharp picture of the relationships built entirely on mutual profit than instead of having genuine care, and exposes that you don't really, if you get to the point, I believe in markets. I believe in selling and buying things. I think that's perfectly fine. But when you get to the point where you no longer see people as anything more than a commodity, and you don't care that this is worshiping Babylon and Babylon's worshiping the beast, that's where it is no longer about profits, but you are going down the wrong path. And so then the tone shifts sharply. So heaven is called to rejoice over Babylon, along with the saints, the apostles, the prophets. God has given judgment to you against her. And the word for you matters because the judgment isn't a celebration for its own sake, but it specifically means it's vindicated all those that Babylon persecuted and has exploited. Then a mighty angel takes up a great millstone and throws it into the sea. A millstone would be, how you would take grain and mill it into flour, right? They're heavy. They're heavy blocks of stone. Millstones are used a lot of places in imagery as just a heavy thing is going to be thrown around you, that kind of thing. And so when it gets thrown into the sea, it says, "So will Babylon, the city of the great city, be thrown down with violence and be found no more." And a deliberate, dramatic physical image of the total and final destruction. It's not, like I said, going to be damaged. It's not going to be diminished. It is gone entirely. A heavy stone, it disappears the moment and it hits the water. It's annihilated. And so then the chapter closes by naming her final crimes directly. The music of the harpists and musicians will never be heard in her again. No craftsman trade will be found in her again. Again, the craftsman, the trade, the seafarer, the music, none of that evil, right? It's evil what she does with it. And so the light of the lamp will shine no more. Her voice, the voice of the bridegroom and the bride will be heard in her no more. Every ordinary marker of living, thriving city, things that we enjoy about our living surroundings is now silent. There's nothing there anymore. The last line gives the reason. In her was found the blood of the prophets and the saints. That means every believer in God and all those who have been slain on earth. Everything in this chapter, all the wealth, all the luxury, all the trade, ultimately answers to the one final accounting that's happening right here. So, like I said, you can't say that that is the past Babylon because that has not happened yet. So, what I'm going to meditate with this week or this day is the idea that, that if you don't come out of her, you take part in her sins. It is a strong call, not about your city or your job or whether you're a merchant or a sea person. None of that is the point here. You ask yourself genuinely if you are participating in a Babylon system with your own life. And it's worth, I think, taking some moments of uncomfort and think about, is it status, economic gain, social arraignment? It's not just, like I said, this is not just about money. This is about all sorts of things. The reason God talked about money so much is he knew that that's how people's hearts would leave worshiping God. But there's many other directions in that particular place. It is a way to lead God. And so that treats people, I think as slaves instead of image bearers of God. And so what does it look like, I think, to come out of, our thinking about this and thinking, is there any sort of way that my life or my trade or the system I live in or the town I live in is participating and thus me with it in this kind of thing? What I'm going to pray about is I want the Lord to show me, at times if I've grown too comfortable in a system and that I'm not evaluating the cost. I'm not evaluating what's going on around me, I guess, to that. I gain things from even where I live, where we all live. We all gain something. That's why we live there. But, we want to have the courage to be able to come out, leaving the system, I think that is causing all of this kind of pain. When it's costly, we know that, it may be you work in something maybe that is directly harming people, is directly hurting people and not benefiting them at all. And you may have to, take a look at that and that there may be a cost. And so I pray that God identifies those things in me so that I can fix my own areas and live the faithful life that I come out of this because I've been called to come out of it. And what I want to share with others is this idea that the difference between relationship built on mutual profits and relationships with care and providing service is different, sharply different than these kings, merchants, and shipfarers that are mourning just their loss of income or their loss of power, even though Babylon is built on the blood of the saints, even though it is slaughtering Christians who believe in Jesus Christ. Oh, well, you got to break a few eggs. And we've seen that. I've seen places where people have been put to death in camps and saying, well, got to break a few eggs. And so when we participate in that, there's a point where we either mourn or are we the saints who rejoice because justice finally came to those she has killed. And we have to ask each other, I think, honestly, what kind of relationship we're building in our own lives and ask God to help make that clearer to us. And what I'm going to share with others is the idea that sometimes people don't know the difference. It's hard. It is really hard because they may say, well, anytime you participate in merchandise or selling and buying things and what was that? There was a movie with John Cusack where you buy, sell, or build things. He didn't want to be a part of any of it. That's not the point here. The point here is the blood of the saints, is that it is sexual immorality. It is immorality. It is participating in people's slavery. And I'm not talking about metaphysical slavery because we call everything slavery again in this day. I'm talking about honest slavery. And so I think, you share with other people who feel uncomfortable with this, help them find the line between what is actual tradesmanship, selling, buying of things, making people's lives within a city, what it is, the music, the light, the commerce that goes on, and what makes it this. And I think that'll be the most helpful. Everyone, thanks so much. Appreciate you being here. Boy, a great city fallen in a single hour, mourned by those who profit or gain power by what she did to the saints, by her immorality, and celebrated by everyone she's wronged, the martyrs that have survived her. This chapter closes the door on Babylon completely. Found no more. That's it. That's the end of it. And so next time we will get to the final, most triumphant chapter in the whole book. There's going to be a wedding, a rider on a white horse, and the final defeat of the beast who is with his false prophets. The placement of the human soul at the very end of this merchant inventory struck you the way it struck me. Go ahead and leave a comment about it. You can email me at northwoodsjill@fastmail.com. But if you go to Jill from the Northwoods, you can find exactly how to contact me. Appreciate it and take care till next time.